So listen, it's been a month since we did our first winners of the raid in terms of DPS, and now the dust has settled and we can clearly see who dominates and who does not dominate. And we are taking all the data into consideration. This is not our personal tier list.
Oh, for sure not. It's basically what people are doing in Mythic right now, and keep in mind that not everybody has skilled Sarkret. And with all of the gear in the tier sets, and things can be skewed to some people, and a lot of parsers are skewed because power infusion. I think this maybe is the best tier to say. Maybe it's the Shadow Priest tier.
And it's gonna be really interesting to see where all the Shadow Priests are ending up in today's meta on the raid. But listen, if you don't enjoy being a Shadow Priest in the Aberrus raid, because maybe that's not your jam, maybe becoming a Raid Shadow Legends player will be your peanut butter.
Shut up, man! Listen! Raid Shadow Legends is the sponsor of today's video, and you know me, if a game has orcs, I am sold. In this case, particularly orcs, skinwalkers, and lizardmen. They're usually my focus when building my team. I still have some dark elves and normie humans until I get my big boy orcs up, but luckily Gaelic is one of the first heroes you get for free.
Oh yeah, and listen, if you never played Raid before, the game is free to play. Has like PC quality graphics on a phone, fancy that, and the main focus of the game is to build a kick-ass team to down dungeons and clan bosses, or even fight other players in the arena.
You can play however you want and build your dream team machine from hundreds of champions, some that are really cool and some that are not orcs. You can min-max it and grind for the leaderboards, or the way I like to play is to set up the tankiest beast champion in front with all the fiery destruction and axe-splitting mayhem in the back. I'm a simple man, what can I say? Oh, and if you are a cultured gamer like myself and enjoy muscles and magic of orcs, there's this event called Call of the Arbiter that gives you a dope orc champion Artek if you log in for 7 days straight until July the 24th. And let me tell you, this dude slaps.
And it's a orc. Did you mention that? It's an orc.
But hey, there are other non-orc champions like Talia, which is an epic one, and you can get her easily by installing the game from the link down below or scanning the QR code on the screen. You'll be supporting your boys, and you'll also start your raid journey with a kick-ass attack chick on your team.
And your team couldn't be complete without an Affliction Warlock.
Oh yeah, and dude, did Affliction pull it this time around?
Well...
Alright, so with the disclaimers that we already mentioned, we're not gonna go through them on all of the specs, but Affliction is actually doing better, maybe better than a lot of people have given it credit for, and we don't even have the 10.1.5 changes. I mean, Affliction is one of the best, no, it's actually the best, as of now, best spec on Experiments, which is, you know, one of the first few bosses, but it's still second on Amalgam and pretty average
on Sarkret. Yeah, we are looking at like performance on specific bosses where a couple of the specs will shine for the most part. And Affliction is doing pretty great. It's sitting in a very good spot. Now we know Affliction isn't the greatest in Mythic Plus, but when it comes to the raid, there's a totally different story. So, with that being said, we have to place it into A tier.
Gotta get it there, man. It's doing really well. Finally, Affliction with some love.
Yes. Arms Warrior. Now, Arms Warrior is like, I would say in the middle of the ground, it's like one of its best bosses is Rashok and Magmarax.
Single target.
Magmarax is like, you know, the most complicated boss you've ever seen in a raid.
Like you hit the boss and then you loot. I don't know. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, but to be fair, Arms Warrior are kind of like above the middle ground when it comes to Sarkret kills and stuff. So it's not like giga bad, although I do feel it would need a little bit of bump to like compete with some of the other melee specs, let's say.
I mean, overall it's average. I think its damage profile is just a little bit weird for this race tier. It doesn't shine outstandingly in single target, although single target is its best bit. And in AoE, it just comes in waves and bursts. And where we have AoE, you kind of really want that AoE dead.
Yeah,
so
it tends to be a little bit sucky on the Zakali fight. But regardless, I think it's still very, very decent. We can place it into a B tier. Now, talking about moving up in the world, Assassination Rogue. But listen, I was kind of expecting this, okay? Because Assassination traditionally has always been a very good and efficient and prominent single target spec.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, the rate being like 90% single target, you can definitely see how the spec has risen. Now, what is the top bosses that Assassination
well, does really well on
like.
Amalgam, which is weird because, okay, so for instance, the best spec on Amalgam is Destro because they can cleave, but Assassination cannot really do that. Although I can see Assassination when, you know, when the bosses swap, they're probably gonna refresh all of the stuff on the one that's leaving and then get
this
the
is the thing, right? It's not as big of an ordeal when you have like 2 targets, okay? But the problem becomes like when you get, I don't know, the Zakali fighter or whatever, which is not bad over there, but you can see there you would have a lot more to manage and juggle. Now, you can see it pretty decently on Sarkaret. It's kind of like in top 3 on Amalgamation.
Not every spec has killed Sarkaret, by the way.
Yeah. Well, when we look into the logs, they like you look at the number of kills on Sarkaret. There's a big discrepancy to some specs. This is one of the specs that has killed Sarkaret on Mythic. Okay, so I guess it's deserving its spot into the A tier.
Baby, we're getting it some love.
Yes.
This does not take away from the fact that Assassination still needs a little bit of love in terms of its design. Everybody pretty much knows it, but it's good to know that the main Assassinations can still enjoy some performance.
Yeah, of course. Okay, now Balance Druid.
Balance.
The Boomkin is top 3 on the Zakali fight. What a shock! It's big AoE all around.
Starfall.
Yeah, another spec that has killed Sarkaret. I guess like the profile of Boomkin is still pretty strong. We are looking at potentially maybe climbing up in the ranks in the future.
So Balance has received a bunch of changes since last year where its single target is a lot better, but its AoE is slightly worse. Although to be fair, I don't know if Balance really needed the AoE that it had last year. And from what we can see by the performance and the fact that we do have a lot more balanced druids killing Sarkareth, it's probably a really good spec for progress. Obviously brings all the druid good stuff, and we'll get to Feral in a second. So even though it is seemingly a good spec for progress, overall the performance seems to fall behind a lot of other specs that are probably getting their trinkets, which are probably way better for them than they are for Balance.
So you can definitely see it do a little bit better in single target. You can see it like on the top 3 specs on Assault, but it's not like super giga impressive when it comes to like the performance and looking at the logs. So in this case, we have to place Boomkin into C tier just purely based on what we've seen from the logs.
It's definitely a different change than what we've had so far.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Arcane Mage, are you ready? Are you ready?
Boy.
This is one of the specs, although it's expecting a rework and probably will play a lot better. However, in the current state in Mythic progression, on the current raid, you can basically say it's the top spec in Sarkaret.
It's definitely, and by a long margin. Like, I'm not sure exactly what's going on with the cutting edge progression people, but it's doing really well overall in Sarkaret. Obviously, Sarkaret is maybe not the hardest end boss of any Mythic raid that we've had so far, but Arcane is definitely outperforming all of the other specs there, and that's really where it matters. And it's still doing a lot well on pretty much most of the fights. It's topping the meters on most fights in terms of overall Mage performance. Is definitely the best Mage fight. I think it might lose to maybe Fire or Frost on one or two occasions.
Again, it really depends on specific fights. This is why it's really difficult to like make an overall ranking, because a lot of these specs will be shining on a specific fight, while some others will be just dog shit or average. But in this case, even its worst fight, it's average at best. Yeah. So okay, S tier.
S tier is the first one. Arcane, man. This is new. This is cool.
Like, keep it like that. Beast Mastery Hunter. Now, again, another spec that has killed Sarkaret, but I think it's like one of the weaker specs out there for the raid.
It's not doing as hot as it did last year. It does have really good damage. Okay, so it's consistent, but I feel so. This is probably a good point to make during this rankings, that Beast Mastery is really good. I mean, we know Sunshade, whenever she stops raid leading, she actually tops the meters. So Beast Mastery can dish out. I think it's just very consistent. Problem with Beast Mastery is that it's in a world where everybody wants Power Infusion and where everybody wants their Echo of Neltharion trinket that just blasts the meters. And Beast Mastery doesn't really benefit from that the same way that other specs do. So that's probably what overall performance is dragging it behind.
Yeah. So you can definitely see it being like below average on the most fights. Okay, if you look at the logs, and I think like Skarn is like its worst fight. But we are seeing a little bit better positioning in terms of like the logs than Boomkin. So we'll place it in front of Boomkin here into C tier. Okay. Now, Demonology Warlock, another spec that this is probably the best Warlock spec for the raid at the moment.
I think there's one fight where it's not the best Warlock spec, but there's like one. And
yeah, it's only one, but you can definitely see it like just crushing it on Sarkaret and like Echo of Neltarian. It's like top 80.
Yeah,
top 70,
it's above 80% of the other specs. It's doing really well overall. And I think this is probably the right time where we're seeing this because we've done this before. And
we have to talk about PI.
Was an SI. It is because it's a whole different world. Man. I mean, you've seen it in our raid as well. When you get PI, you have like about 80k extra single target burst, which is nuts. The trinket as well from Echo. This is probably the spec that's most anchored into external power sources this tier, and we can see that because of our performance. But it is the performance, that is the data, and everybody has access to these one way or another, so it is what it is. It's
S tier, baby.
Speaking of the last time an S tier spec was an S tier spec, Destruction Warlock might not be S tier this time around.
No, but listen, it did clear Sarkaret, okay? But it's kind of looking...
spec for progression.
Yes, but it is like out of all the three Warlock specs, it is kind of looking to be the worst. Surprise, surprise.
I know a little, one or two things about that. This show is, I don't think anything changed yet. It might change in 10.1.5, but from what I know, Destro is the best simming single target spec in the game, in the tier right now. However, it is also one of the more punished specs when it comes to movement. And if you've played Range on Sarkaret, you might know what I'm talking about, and I'm not gonna relive that nightmare right here. But Destruction is overall very consistent, very solid. It has really good boss damage, does do a lot of AoE, but you kind of have to swap builds, so you won't have access to both at the same time, more or less. But it is pretty good. Overall, I think it's a B tier.
Pretty decent, yes, up there with arms where you can talk about, you know, amalgamation where, you know, the Havoc cleaving is just a beast around. I've seen Flame in the raid, and it's, you know, it's just like breaking shit. All right. Fire Mage. Now, we did talk about, you know, some other mage specs maybe being a little bit better than Arcane. Nah, that's not the case, man. Fire is really good. It's like, I think the second best spec on Echo of Neltarian. We've seen one parse with a Sarkaret
but
kill.
It killed it.
There's one mage at one part. I'm sure
it's probably gonna be more by the time you actually watch this, because we've obviously done the research and recording a little bit ahead of time. But it is coming up to be a little bit good. I do feel like Fire Mage, from what we've played and what we know as well, is also kind of like Demonology, a little bit reliant on certain factors.
What, PI again? What the fuck, man?
As opposed to Demonology, Demonology kind of stands on its own a little bit as well. Fire, not so much, and right now it's really outshined by Arcane.
Okay, so we can still place it into like the safe zone here, right? In terms of like progression in the Mythic raid, this is where it's at. Next up, Frost Mage. Frost Mage, I would say pretty much the same story, like a little bit above average to like really good single target in the single target, super single target fights.
It's actually really good. I think it might be better than Fire, I'm not sure. But it's like so competitive.
Yeah, the thing is, we haven't seen any Sarkaret kills, at least in the public logs we've checked out. And this kind of like is a bummer, because, you know, we wanted to place it higher if we would have had a couple of logs for Sarkaret, but you can definitely see it like struggling on Assault and basically in AoE.
Those are usually the first boss of the raid. It's not that
maybe
big of a deal.
Struggling is a little bit too harsh, but it's definitely on competition with some of the other specs on those bosses who are just melting it. So let's just place it into the safe zone here. Yeah, but it's, I guess, a little bit than Arms Warrior, but not that much.
It's a little bit behind the Fire at the very least.
Okay. Marksmanship Hunter, what a story. What the hell happened here?
This is so weird. I think it's one of those, once again, the good spec, because we are seeing Marksmanship kill Sarkaret, which we can only assume that, you know, people who are getting cutting edge and they're progressing, they're using Marksmanship for their progress, which is obviously a really good spec. But it's probably the same story as we had last year, and slightly probably in Shadowlands as well, where it's very good at the beginning of the tier, but doesn't scale as highly and as fast as all the other specs with all of the gear that's going on. And to be fair, outside of the fact that it kills Sarkaret, it doesn't really have any redeeming factors into it. It's pretty much below average on all the fights, and even one of the worst. It's actually the worst specs on Assault.
Zakari, yeah, I've seen that on Echo of Neltarian as well. So it's not like D tier or F tier material, but it's definitely into the C tier for sure.
Could be better. Could be better.
Oof. Okay, Outlaw Rogue. Now, Outlaw is an interesting story because first off, you have the sub-rogue dominance, and you already seen the assassination. We'll get to that. Now, Outlaw hasn't really seen like big ass changes, and I know like the rogue community, the Outlaw Rogue community, is kind of like crying out for a couple of things, specifically some bugs still being present within the toolkit. Yeah, but that being said, you can definitely see it being like the top 3 specs on the Rashok. It's like above average and pretty much consistent within the most fights. This is the thing about Outlaw. It doesn't really like get super spiked up in any of the fights. You would expect to see it like on Zakali being super great, but nah,
you think
it's
so,
target cap, baby. Like in the last phase of Zakali, like when you have everybody around, that's where you're gonna see Outlaw being like wrecked from in comparison with the other specs that are not kept on AoE.
Yeah, we've done Zakali as well on Mythic, and a couple of the AoE fights that we've seen are not where you have AoE. You don't really have an issue with AoE damage, so you still want that boss damage, and it feels like there's a pattern with specs like Outlaw, with like Arcane as well, that are not amazing in AoE, but with giga single target damage, they're still gonna top the meters, and they're still gonna be overall ideal for a pushing guild that's trying to get the last boss, because you want that boss to go down. And I think that's probably what's gonna keep Outlaw really close to.
Yeah, we can definitely see it like losing out to the majority of bosses to Assassination and some Rogue, but it's still up there.
It's very consistent though. It's kind of like the Beast Mastery of melee, but better.
Yeah. So I think we can
put it in front of SS. I think.
Yeah, there's like I don't know a couple of parses that would pull it a little bit ahead than Assassination was due to be expected.
Survival Hunter is bringing a surprise, although I kind of like 50% expected it based on the numbers of the tier set brought in. It has been addressed, and overall its performance is better. It's actually the best Hunter spec right now in the raid, which I mean
that's saying something, right?
That's great. I mean, it was good in Vault as well. I don't think it was the worst Hunter spec in Vault. I think it was, you know, kind of juggling there at the bottom, but it's doing really well. It still has its own issue with its all rework that I would hope that it would get. But besides that, it's, you know, top 3 on Echo. It's at the very least above average on most bosses. It is doing really well. It's a good time to be survival if your hope is to progress through Mythic and essentially get that Sarkarth as well, but it doesn't have
no logs. I've seen no logs with survival on Sarkarth. However, everything that is there is pumping the spec to be on the top of the specs, and I think we can put it in front of the Rogues.
Oh my god, yeah, it's doing better than Rogues.
Yeah, so how about that, Survival Hunters? Enjoyed the love.
It's coming back, it's coming back.
All right, Devastation Evoker. And Devastation Evoker is, again, one of those specs, range DPS, that can do amazing.
Oh, it got a good set of changes this time around.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if you look at like the Sarkareth logs, it's like top 4 over there.
Yeah, so far, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like consistently above average to top 70, 80%, something like that. I don't see any more negatives with the Devastation Evoker. It
has been addressed. The squishiness has been kind of addressed as well. Thing, right? And the fact that there are because as a caster main as well, the fact that there are so many fights that are punishing you when you move, I think Devastation has an edge there because you do have the hover where you can just cast while moving, and its overall talents and damage profile has been improved, where it had a lot of bad single target performance last year. Obviously, it has been improved now, and it's actually doing really well. It's one of the best casters in the game, period. Yeah, we were very close to placing it into S tier. However, there's one more spec that will belong into that category. It's a little bit below.
We'll keep it. I think it's fair to say we'll keep Devastation at the front, top tip.
And this is for Mythic, man, so you know the spec is good.
Yeah. Elemental Shaman. Now, we have seen Elemental Shaman killing Sarkareth with like above average performance. That's
for sure. Yeah,
okay. It's kind of like in top 4 on the Zakali fight, if I'm not mistaken.
It's really good AoE. And what was most surprising when we looked at Elemental was that it was overall doing better than Enhancement. And I don't think we expected this. I mean, we kind of knew this. Only Elemental is seemingly picking up some steam. But better than Enhancement, dude, I don't know. This was surprising.
Okay, it's kind of slightly over there. You can definitely see it's taking a cake. If you look at the logs in general on the mythic bosses, you'll see just a slight edge from Elemental in comparison to Enhancement. And that being said, I guess we can place it into A tier as well.
It's a really good spec. It's performing, it's pushing the end content.
Yes, well, okay, Enhancement time.
So speaking of the devil.
Speaking of the devil, yes, and Enhancement is like really good on Sarkareth, above 60%. I mean, I think it's the same story with Echo of Neltarion.
Yeah, so this is a similar story with Marksmanship as well, where Enhancement, we all knew that Enhancement was really strong. Obviously, Season 1 was top melee spec in the raid. It's doing really well as well, but it's probably still in the vein of Marksmanship, where it's just not picking enough power from all of the stuff that you get. And when you have, and you're probably gonna have a Warlock if you're pushing high-end bosses, you're not gonna get a PI as an enhancement, because we are talking about probably some of the highest performing specs using that PI, not all of them, but Enhancement will probably love PI as well as a haste-loving spec.
Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter is Enhancement is really struggling with like pure single target bosses. You can see like very close to the bottom on most of those, like one of the worst specs on Magmorax. So because of that, we'll place it here into the C tier.
It's seen better days, but I think this doesn't take away from the fact that it's probably one of the best specs to progress with.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Feral Druids, time to look at the kitty cats. Now, okay, there's a lot of like not so positive stuff to talk about when it comes to the performance of Feral Druids right now in Mythic progression. You can talk about the fact that the spec has cleared Sarkret, so we have data that proves the spec has killed Sarkret.
The data supports you picking up the spec, but it kind of ends there.
Yeah, I mean, Assault of Razakali is kind of like the best boss for Feral, obviously, because there's a lot of AoE over there, and you can definitely see it perform. But listen, we were talking about Enhancement struggling with single target. Man, look at Feral. Jesus. And it's such a different perspective, man, because I remember Feral's being like one of the best single target specs, if you know.
Times change, man. And I think a big part of this is also the tier set. I don't know how much power exactly, like numbers wise, but we all know that the tier set is a little bit meh for Feral. They have been addressing it lately, and it's probably gonna get some oomph in 10.1.5. But until then, Feral is one of the only spec
that's have to put
bottom.
It here.
On about 4 bosses in the raid. Like half the bosses in the raid, Feral is literally the bottom. In terms of overall performance, right? It still does good damage, don't get me wrong.
Nah, this is like top of the creme de la creme, okay? It's not you and me. But D tier, sad days for kitties. Feel bad. Now, Frost DK. Frost DK, you can... wow, see it like...
Some Arthas-infused nerds out there are picking up their Frost DK, and they are slapping by the way with both the Breath and Obliteration builds being viable in the raid.
Hello!
Even on the same fights, I think we've seen Echo of Neltharion. Frost is by far the best. Like, I don't know what Frost is doing there. I think somehow its cooldown is really aligning because as of recording this, when we've seen it, the top log is a Breath of Sindragosa one. The next 4 or 5 are Obliteration. Then we have another Breath of Sindragosa, so it's all over the place and is crushing it. It's so awesome to see.
Yeah, not only that, but it's also top on Magmorax with the Breath build, just to mention it. So it's kind of nice to see that, you know, either Obliteration or Breath can still work. And obviously, it's a little bit more easier to maintain that in a raid environment. A tier?
A tier for sure.
Let's place it into A tier. I think it's in front of Affliction, maybe?
Probably, yeah.
Yes.
It's weird, but it is. It's a weird world, man.
Fury Warrior is up next, and Fury Warrior is... I mean, we were thinking about placing this into A tier. It is like in top 70% on Sarkret. It's not, it's not. But you can see it like really shine in the AoE fights. The multiple AoE fights we have in this raid.
Oh, there's quite a few, and I think its accessibility... accessibility to its damage profile is very consistent, and it's probably what's keeping Fury up in the meters in a lot of the fights. It's still losing a little bit to single target in front of arms, which I guess it's fine, but that's probably also what's keeping it from going into A tier. Although it's crushing Sarkret, there's a lot of ad fights, so I'm assuming that there's a bunch of stuff there, but it's still overall probably the best warrior spec.
It is better in terms of like the logs we've seen and the data we checked. It's looking to be a lot better than arms, not by a huge margin, but it's there. Havoc Demon Hunter.
We usually rank Havoc really highly, especially in Mythic Plus, and that's where it deserves its ranking. Now, in Raid, though, I think we've kind of seen this coming, and people have been pointing it out. We did do a prediction. I'm pretty sure that we probably ranked it higher in our prediction than it is now.
We'll make a video on that.
But it's doing really well on Sarkret. It's obviously really good for progression specs, so that's probably what's keeping it in the meters and still very relevant. But it's probably losing a lot of steam. Once again, it's the scaling argument one more time, where we see a lot of the specs that have been really good at the start of the progression be kind of poop now in terms of overall performance. Yeah.
So in this case, you can totally see Havoc Demon Hunters like being above average on Echo, pretty average to good on Sarkret, but other than that, it's like falling a little bit behind the other specs. I think C tier is in order here, a little bit better than Marksmanship Hunter.
Could see some better days.
Yeah. Remember when people were calling out Red Paladins being the most broken and OP class?
Oh, you called it, man.
In the raid, and I told everybody this is gonna be the case for a week or two until everybody else gets their gear, and then Red's gonna fall behind.
Well, similar to Enhance and Havoc, but I think Red won a little bit more.
The damage profile of Red is still very strong, okay? So, influenced or not by the gear and the stats, You can see that it's one of the top 4 specs on the amalgamation because, you know, it's one of those spells that has range and, you know, the uptime on the boss counts quite a lot. Single target has fallen a little bit, and it has fallen because, once again, you see a lot of other specs doing way better. It doesn't mean that Reds just suck, it just means that other people got their gear and Reds are like in the same spot as they were 3 or 4 weeks ago.
For sure.
Okay, it's like when moving further and further into the mythic progression, you're gonna see Reds slowly coming down or just maintaining their spots in the average zone. So it's not an A tier spec, it's not an S tier spec. I guess we can put it in front of B tier. It's like the most fair we can be with Red Paladins.
It's really good. And I think B tier is probably where most people kind of want to play their specs. If your spec is in the B tier, you're going to be fine.
Right. So listen, like when we ranked Red Paladins in the past, you know, where they were because of the data, everybody was complaining that we're Red Paladin haters. Now, when we said it's gonna be S tier and A tier or whatever, where people complain about Red is OP
we're
and broken.
Gonna show you guys some data at the end of the video. No, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
But
I'm waiting for the haters now. We are Red Paladin haters. Come at us.
I think not to do anything with the sponsorship of the video, but I do think that Shadow Priest is the theme of this raid.
Shadow Priest makes or breaks a lot of these specs. This is the honest truth.
This is probably the best and worst sign for Power Infusion as a whole. Obviously, Shadow. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Shadow Assault. Shadow is actually really good. It has, you know, Giga single target. I think is the best spec on Assault. Oh, yeah. And it's really good in single target as well. It doesn't have to sacrifice as much as it did last year. Definitely from the bucket of this spec is Giga on AoE and shit in single target, Shadow is probably won the most out of all of them, even more so than Devastation, because it's definitely really doing good boss damage.
It's not I mean, the pure single target fights, like,
yeah,
you know,
pure, yeah.
It's there's like you know, kind of sucky over there. However, it's like, you know, top on Assault, you can definitely see that being like the second best on Sarkaret.
Oh yeah,
it brings PI to the table, and this is why you're gonna see it all.
That's why Demonology is up there. That's why. Yeah, there's gonna be another spec.
Yeah, there's what spec, I wonder.
I don't know, but I think Shadow definitely deserves.
Let's place it at A tier.
A top spec.
Yeah, A tier for sure. Subtlety Rogue, definitely one of the better melee specs in the raid because it will do just great on both single target and AoE. Now you can definitely see it, you know, with Locke's skill in Sarkaret. It's no surprise. It's like I think it's the best rogue spec currently in the raid.
Yeah.
It's like at least the most consistent. It's like very good in AoE. Again, you see there's a Kali fight. You can see a lot of like big damage over there with decent damage to some moments of shining on pure single target as well. That being said, there's a lot of other range specs and other melee specs that will get PI, wink wink, that will take the cake from Subtlety.
It's still consistent, it's still pretty solid, and it's kind of the story of Red, but maybe in a better light, because it's not losing as much, and it's still doing really well overall.
Yeah, let's place it into A tier. I think it's in front of Survival, so we'll keep it on this. And speaking about those specs that are receiving PI and doing great,
all right, listen.
What are we talking about here?
We know Unholy has been the PI target of Season 1, and it might not be the best one today, but it's still pretty good. And not to mention that Unholy just picked up a lot of steam in the last couple of weeks. We've seen it at the beginning of the raid. It was okay, but nothing really exciting. But surprise, surprise, we looked at the logs today, man.
We look at the logs, and Unholy DK is the best on Kazawa, on Brashok. It's top 3 on Sarkaret, on Magmorax, and it's top 4 on Echo of Neltharion.
Jesus.
This is
It's a long time coming, to be fair, because even though Unholy was really good in a lot of fights in the past couple of years, it's never been like the king.
A different story when you look at like Mythic Plus locks or whatever, but again, you don't see as many comes with a PI thing over there for Unholy DKs and Mythic Plus. And I'm pretty sure if that were to happen, you would see a lot more presence and up rankings for the spec. But in terms of the raid, I mean, we can place it here with the S tier team.
Celebrate Unholy.
This is the thing, right? Like these specs are obviously very, very pumped on by PI. Some people hate it, some people love it.
It is what it is. It is the meta.
Discussion.
Get a priest in your group. That's the conclusion of this tier list.
Everybody get a priest. Yes. Okay.
Let's take it down a notch.
Let's take it down a notch,
I'm a little
baby.
bit tired now.
Windwalker Monk and Windwalker Monks. I mean, they're like average on most parts, pretty bad on specific parts. Like, okay, single target is a little bit below average, and I would say, okay, Sarkareth, Echo of Notarion, and Assault. Now, these are fights that are starting off single target, but then there's also some cleave or AoE happening around, right? So this is why you can see it being a little bit more average on these fights.
Yeah.
When it comes to like pure single target fights, like a Magmarax, you can like Kazara and stuff, well, it's...
I mean, it cleared Sarkareth, but overall its boss damage is still poop. And I always look at the Windwalker patch notes and seeing that their single target are getting buffed every time, and yet still every time people are like, but dude, but they're getting buffs, and it's, how is it still not enough? Like, what are they missing, man? Because it's becoming a meme like for 3-4 years now. Jesus.
Yeah, I know. But with that being said, we're looking at the logs. There's a little bit of a better performance than Marksmanship, Havoc, and Enhancement. So it's in the C tier, but it's doing better than those other specs. And this is how it's looking on an average, let's say, combination.
It's interesting. There's a big fat chunk right there in the middle, and seeing how A tier has the most amount of specs is really good, because we're living in a world where a lot of the specs are going to be really good. And not to mention, this is Mythic we're talking about here. Pretty much most of the specs have killed Sarkareth by the time you're watching this, or maybe even taking this into your own alt or main decision. All of the specs have been killed Sarkareth by now, so it's still pretty good. But, we have some data to kind of show you guys exactly what we're talking about, because it might change. It might change. But right now, we're looking at some very interesting things. Like, I think Sarkareth is probably one of the most interesting
I think Sarkareth is like first of all, it's the last boss. So when you see specs here, you're obviously knowing how well they perform. Again, looking at this, you can for sure see like, the Arcane Mage, just breaking everybody, then you have the Shadow Priest and stuff. Unholy DK. Yeah, this is the thing, right? When we're doing this tier list for raids, it's again very, very dependent on what bosses we're talking about. If you're gonna talk specific bosses, these specs are moving all over the place. But on average,
what's cool is that we have different style of bosses, and each spec is good at certain bosses. For instance, we have Rashok, where the DKs are just crushing the meters really hard, and you're seeing like specs do well and bad on a lot of bosses. Like there are like Zakarn as well, where we see Demonology still ranking it really high, but Pearl still being poop, and the DK is in the middle of the pack. So it's a good design, I think, in the raid, although people might criticize it, where you will not always see the S tier specs being top at every boss, right? You'll see, okay, this is where I can also shine as well. And I think this is a really good world to be in.
It's an interesting approach to raiding, where you don't feel like your spec is like poop all around, except for Druid. You can definitely feel like if you play any of the specs, and progressing through Mythic, you will have a fight where you're probably going to shine more than others, similar to like range and DPS, who like go range DPS and melee DPS, who like go for different builds according to their composition, to the boss they encounter. I think it's a better approach than just having 3 specs dominating all bosses or whatever. So this is the reality of it. If you look at a boss by boss case, you won't see this ranking. This is like an average we try to make from everything, but yeah, it's with a grain of salt, more or less.
It's a really good world to be in, and don't take our tier list as a deciding factor to what you should play. We're merely looking at the data as well, and I think I don't know if it can be more skewed than it is today, considering how many more external power influxes you can have for a spec that can inflate its overall performance or deflate it, where you have specs in C tier that are really good for progression, like Enhancement, like Havoc, but they're not doing overall the same as everybody else.
With that being said, thank you patrons for supporting the content, and thank you Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring the video. Once again, guys, you can check the link in the description and download the game to your phone, or just scan the QR code on the screen and make sure you start kicking it off with Raid Shadow Legends. See you in the next one, everybody. Bye, have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.